email. This book will continue in your email account. Ladies and gentlemen, it's 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 12:30 p.m. Pacific Time, and that means it's time for I Got Next. Welcome. This is Games Radar's weekly talk show, where we talk to interesting cats who are into interesting things, and they don't necessarily make video games. We're breaking our rules just a little bit today with our guest, who is a really cool individual. We'll talk about him in a second. I'm going to talk about myself first. My name is Anthony John Agnello, senior social editor here at Games Radar, and I'm joined by two wonderful human beings today. I have global editor-in-chief Sophia Tong. Hello, Sophia.
Hi, Anthony, and everybody else.
I have writer and contributing editor David Roberts. Hello, David.
Hello. I showed them this shirt, but I'm repping for Diamond Dogs.
Get that Diamond Dogs up in here.
So yeah, it's God, it's a very exciting day today. I stayed up. Well, last night they I bought a digital copy on PSN because they're like, it's going to be available at 9 o'clock Pacific time. I was like, yes. So after 4 days of PAX, I'm ready to do this. And then there was a tweet, Sony tweeted, that some people might not be able to play Metal Gear Phantom Pain until midnight Pacific time. I'm like, oh, don't do this to me. Not today. Not today.
Boo.
But no, it worked. I got through the bizarre, mind-melting intro again because I previewed it. And, seeing people's reactions to that, I was like, I've been wanting to talk about this with people for so long. I saw that intro for, 2 months ago.
Yeah.
And it's, the most bizarre. I still have no idea what's going on.
I love... So, everybody, let me tell you a little bit what we're doing today. We are, as you can...
Actually.
I am playing. I am playing right now. Right now, everybody, I am playing Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain. And as Dave has expressed right now, we're a little pumped about Metal Gear. I would say that we have it's reached psychosis level. The fervor with which the Games Radar crew has been talking about Metal Gear lately, it's gotten problematic. We're very excited that we can finally play this. And so today we are playing it, but later on, in half an hour, we're going to have a really very fascinating individual on. We're going to have a guy named Raymond Benson on the show. And if you're unfamiliar with that name, Raymond Benson's a guy, behind the scenes. He's associated with many different franchises that you'll be familiar with by name, such as James Bond. He's one of the non-Ian Fleming official writers of James Bond novels. He is one of the people who has made many text adventure video games back in the 80s out of some popular authors' work like Stephen King. But he is also the man behind the novelizations of Metal Gear Solid 1 and Metal Gear Solid 2, Guns of the Patriots. So he's going to be joining us at 4 p.m. Eastern in just half an hour. And everybody just, go ahead and get your questions ready, because I know Dave and I have some very serious questions for this man.
I wish I read these books ahead of time, because I played those two games, and I would really like to know what's going on, and it might be easier to read it in book format.
Sophia, this is why I wanted you here alongside Dave, because Dave is, Diamond Dog #1 there. He is a hardcore Metal Gear fan, and has been, in many ways, Games Radar's bookkeeper for Metal Gear continuity. A wonderful feature sort of explaining what the hell is going on in all of these games. And Sophia, you are, I feel representative of many people in gaming who knows of Metal Gear, has played Metal Gear, but has no clue
what is going on.
What the hell is even happening? What is...
No, I love the games. I think they're great. They're super fun to play. I could even figure out, wait, Snake? How does that even work? What are all the different snakes? What is going on? I don't really know who's what. Someone recently told me they're clones. I'm like, wait, when did I miss this? How did I not...
That's the thing. You know certain things about the series, but
Yeah.
but getting from point A to point B is kind of interesting. This is why I'm so excited to talk to somebody who's written a novel version of these. A novel, like, I'm sure that these weren't, like, outsider art, and he wasn't taking, like, big narrative structure risks with Metal Gear Solid, even though I think you would have to if you want to tell these in a linear fashion.
I may need cliff notes for the novel.
So, the important thing to know about the Metal Gear series, and I say this as someone who loves these games, who loves the story, is that even to someone who has played them all through and has analyzed the story, they still don't make sense. Like, see, they're as inscrutable to super fans as they are to people, like, casual observers. And that's kind of part of the magic of Metal Gear, is just how, like, there is no grand scheme. Like, Hideo Kojima didn't set out to tell this, like, decade-spanning story arc, like, you know, something like Harry Potter or Star Wars or whatever. Like, it's very clear that he's just kind of making this stuff up as he goes, and somehow, like, Metal Gear Solid 4 ties everything together in the most ridiculous, over-the-top fashion way, like, possible, but it does. But yeah, like, you could go into Phantom Pain blind, or you could know everything, and you'll still probably not have a clue, just because the character names change so much between game to game, allegiances shift so much between game to game, the game jumps back and forth between time periods, or the series jumps back and forth between time periods, between games. It's unlike anything, like, in modern media, I think. There's really nothing quite like it.
Yeah, I can't point to... I mean, outside of, like, comic books. You know, like, you have comic books that have 70 years of continuity behind them, but it's different because there's always... There are changes in who's writing these things. There is a shift in authorship that just does not happen with, like, Metal Gear. Like, how many different pieces of large-scale mainstream media can you point to where there has been one authorial voice behind it for almost 30 years? That's kind of distinct. And I mean, like, yeah, like, there's, like, what, Charles Schultz. Like, you could be like, oh, yeah, Charles Schultz wrote Peanuts for 50 years. But, like, Snoopy didn't all of a sudden get clones of himself where one of them was the president and the other one had, like, a David Lee Roth mullet, and everybody hated each other. That's not how that went.
Snoopy didn't lose his hand and then put his clone Snoopy hand on and have the hand take over his mind. And but no, it was actually a psychosomatic, like, mind control. He was tricking his brain into thinking that his arm was taking over his hand so he could fool the Patriots, a super secret organization that is trying to control the world's events and information, also nanomachines.
Dave, you realize that we're about to talk to a person that had to take everything you just said and translate it into an intelligible, coherent, chapter-by-chapter structure?
Yeah, I'm very interested. I want to know how he was able to fit in the I Need Scissors 61-bit in Metal Gear Solid 2.
All right, can you explain that for everybody that is unfamiliar with what you're talking about?
Okay, so there's a part in Metal Gear Solid 2 where... okay, first I need to back up. Metal Gear Solid 2 is quite possibly... It's considered by most video game scholars, as it were, as the first postmodern video game, as in it's the first game that is aware that it's a game, and it presents itself as a game to the player, and uses the nature of it being a sequel, and uses that as part of its theme. It's totally self-aware. So there's a part near the end where you upload a virus into GW, which is the AI that is part of Arsenal Gear, which is like the super weapon that it's not really explained well what exactly Arsenal Gear does. But someone's at my door. I think
Okay, Arsenal gear
Um,
looks really cool going through
Yeah.
the water. There you go.
Oh yeah.
Is that
Yeah.
accurate? Does
Yeah,
that
and
count?
it's like there are probably nukes on there, and it's got a ton of Metal Gears also there. So, so there's that. So you upload the virus, and then the line between the game and the player starts to blur, like even more than it normally does in these games. So your commanding officer, who is Roy Campbell, supposed to be Roy Campbell, the commander from the first game, has been giving Raiden these orders the entire game. But then all of a sudden he starts wigging out. Like, he starts sending you messages, like, from the first Metal Gear, like, invade outer heaven, stop Metal Gear, and he starts sounding like a robot. Then there's a part where he talks about, like, I forget the entire line, but, like, it's just it's word salad at this point. Your codec screen starts showing, like, interviews with pretty Asian ladies.
Right,
You get, like, the fourth wall has officially been punched into oblivion at this point, because by uploading the virus into GW, you've effectively uploaded a virus into the game. Because, you're not sure if the game at this point has been a simulation the entire time. Is what you're playing actually, like, happening, quote unquote, in the world, or is everything up to here been like a VR program and fake? And, like, even by the end of the game, you're not really sure, did the events of the game actually happen? What is real? What?
Yeah, and, like, literally to the point that... And guess what, everybody? 15 years are up. We're going to get into spoilers for Metal Gear Solid 2 right now. Deal with it. Like, at the end of the game, you have 3 human beings who are just basically sitting... Whoa. Sorry about that, everybody. That is my doorbell that you were hearing. That's what that giant beeping was.
Foghorn?
That wasn't like somebody trying to be like, censoring spoilers, no spoilers for any game ever. That's not what that was. At the end of that game, you have 3 human beings who are standing there, like on a crashed, enormous submarine on the southern tip of Manhattan. And
they're on top of Federal Hall.
Yeah, they're on top of Federal Hall, and everybody is just wandering around, going to work around them. Like, they're not like, hey, what's up with this submarine? Why is the President of the United States wearing octopus arms? Nobody says that. You can't tell, like, there is no way to tell what is reality while you're playing that game. And it's beautiful.
And, like, there's a part that a lot of people get confused on, where, because, like, the game has 2 major twists near the end, and one of the twists is fake. So first off, Revolver Ocelot reveals that that Raiden infiltrating Big Shell and the whole mission is part of it's called the Solid Snake simulation.
Right.
Which is basically, like, what they wanted to do is they wanted to create a scenario where they could see if they could create a soldier with the qualities of Solid Snake. So basically, the entire Big Shell is a recreation of the first game. And if you look at, like, all the boss fights, the major story beats are virtually copied from the first game, but just tweaked a little bit. Like, the boss fight against Fat Man is basically the boss fight against Vulcan Raven. The boss fight against Fortune is basically the Sniper Wolf fight, but just with little tweaks. People die like they do in the first game of heart attacks from like what appear to be Fox die. So the entire game, you're just thinking like, why is this so similar to the first game? And then that's what, like, you find out from Revolver Ocelot that it's like, oh, no, it was part of this thing. We're trying to recreate Solid Snake by recreating the events of Shadow Moses in a separate environment. But no, that's actually not true. The program was actually, it's the Selection for Societal Sanity program. I believe I'm getting that right. Which was a program created by the Patriots to spread misinformation. Now, the next 15 minutes of dialogue that the AI commander is spouting out right now. When I was
Dave, time out. Sophia,
Okay.
at what point in this diatribe did you get completely lost?
When he first started, because when I played Metal Gear 2, I was just like, I really like the game. You get to do cartwheels as Raiden. It's great.
Right. See, like Dave, I've played that game many times, and I hear you being like, yeah, and then it's a solid snake simulation. I'm like, I get that motivation, and then you're like, oh no, it's the societal sanity thing, and this is about mind control, and it's about the Patriots, and as soon as you say the words, the Patriots, I immediately say, contextually, is he talking about football? No.
No.
Is he talking about Benjamin Franklin? No. I have no
Amazing
idea
how
what the hell
brain
you're
just,
talking about.
Wanders off, because I'm listening to this as if I've never played it before. The thing is, I played it years ago, and I just remember really enjoying the gameplay and just really liking it. No idea what was happening. No idea what the characters were doing, and ultimately what the story was about. So listening to you kind of describe it, I was like, oh yeah, I remember that guy's name. Oh wait, do I remember that boss fight? Wait, what happened there?
Yeah, no, like it's inscrutable. Like even at the time I think it was 18.
Hey guys, you
when I
know
played
you know what's happening right now? I just answered my door and got mail in the middle of
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, this is like Mr. Rogers. This is like the Mr. Rogers talk show. Let's see what I got in the mail, everybody. Hey.
Did you get your strategy guide too? Because I think that's just what came in the mail for me.
It's a copy of Mad Max. Hooray!
Oh, cool.
That's not Tom Hardy. Get out of here, game. The hell is in here? The hell is going on? Hold on. Guys, they gave us a gun. There's a gun in this FedEx envelope. And I don't know, it's very heavy, but it's very small. I don't think I can hurt anybody with this. Alright. Alright, mail interruption over. Hello to everybody who's joining us as well. Hello, Mr. Death in a Box. Hello, the Gaming Pineapple. Hello, La Creative Austin? I'm not sure if I can parse out what that name is. But hello to all of you. I've not played Until Dawn. Dave, you were about to say you were 18 when it came out.
Yes, I was 18 when it came out, and like the entire speech that the AI colonel gives at the end just went way over my head, right? Like, as I'm sure it did for many people who played it. Playing it again, like 10 years later, it makes perfect sense.
Right.
And let me tell you why. Because the Patriots, what they talk about is how the Patriots are, like, at least represented by the game. This AI that's talking to you is talking about how the Patriots have this plan to control the world's information because information is flooding the internet. It's becoming way too easy to create information, to distribute it, and it's way too easy for that information to stick around and remain available to look at. Because before the internet, information would come and go. Like certain bits would stick around, but unless you had a library or a magazine or whatever, or kept like some kind of archive, information wasn't this like permanent thing. Like information could be removed or controlled that way. But with the internet, it's easy to archive that information, and now anyone can create information, put it out there as truth, and because there are so many different types of information available, anyone can find something that they cling to that they can perceive as truth. Now, at the time, you're listening to this guy talking, like, what is he talking about? But now, it's like Kojima basically predicted stuff like the proliferation of Twitter, the Fox News kind of like that sort of like crazy media cycle where you have movements like the Tea Party, or you have these fringe movements that are gaining prominence because everyone believes they're right, because there's information out there that proves them right, and that information doesn't go away. So that's what the program was for, that the AI wanted to do with Metal Gear Solid 2. They wanted to create a program that said, okay, well, we can control your thoughts by giving you incorrect information. We can make you perceive what we want you to perceive, and in that regard, the simulation in Metal Gear Solid 2 was a success.
All right. So
I'm just
right
watching
there.
Anthony get his ass kicked right now.
Now, Sophia, I want to see you be super sneaky while trying to have a conversation with
That's
people.
what I'm impressed about. I cannot play and talk at the same time. It just doesn't happen.
Do stuff. Now, Dave, I'm right there with you. The more I have played Metal Gear Solid 2, like the second time I ever played it, I got it. I was like, wait a second, why did I think this was so weird the first time I did it? This makes a lot of sense. That said, it is told, all of this information is told in a very obtuse way.
Oh yeah.
Now, I realize that, like, that is the ambitions of the creators of that game straining against their chosen medium at the time that they were making it. Like, I feel like, you could have made a whole multimedia version of Metal Gear Solid 2 today that incorporates, second screen and all the things that it was very much predicting, and that narrative would be a lot more, digestible, I guess is the word I'm looking for.
Well, and Kojima's never been one to edit himself. Like, he usually says in 15 minutes. He says in 15 minutes what we can all say in, like, 2. So that's also the problem with that last bit, is it's so verbose, and by that time you're like, oh my god, this cutscene is 30 minutes long. I want to fight. I want to do something. I want to play. Let me play the game, please. And Kojima's always brushed up against that. Metal Gear Solid 4 is probably his most verbose work, which is what excited me most about the Phantom Pain. It's like finally he's letting his gameplay breathe a little bit.
Wasn't it just me, or like Metal Gear 1 and 2, you couldn't pause the cutscenes? Like, you would just skip it entirely, or you have to sit there and watch it the whole thing in one go?
I think that's one.
Yeah, I remember playing, and I was like, nobody talk to me. I have, like, 20 minutes that I need to sit here and, like, focus, because otherwise I will have no idea what's going on. I'm like, nope, can't talk to, because I can't listen to do anything else. I just remember that kind of a thing.
Sophia, did you ever find yourself being like, oh my god, I want to get through this dialogue, but then something would happen that was so strange and so, like crassly, scatologically funny that you were like, wait a second, now I just need to keep watching this. Like, the first time
I don't know what's happening.
Like, I played Metal Gear Solid 4 right when it first came out, and I was like, man, this is so cool. Like, the opening soliloquy of that game of, him being like, oh, war has changed, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
I was so into that. And then it let me play for 10 minutes, and I was like, that was awesome what I just did. And then it stopped me, and, like, for 10 minutes, I'm sitting there watching a cutscene being like, this is tough. I gotta get out of here. But then Dennis Rodman came out and gave a can of soda to a monkey in a diaper. And then the monkey was like, hey, I like your gun. How about more guns? Give me more soda and a cigarette. And then I was like, I need to watch whatever happens now. I'm stuck. I can't skip any of this. This is the best thing.
Remember
So
those
random.
live-action video sequences at the beginning of Metal Gear Solid 4? Like, for no reason?
No reason.
At all?
No reason. It's like advertising all of these private military corporations, which wouldn't even become an interesting plot point until freaking Peace Walker. Like, the factions in 4 don't mean anything.
Yeah. Fun fact, that game takes place in 2014.
No. Does it really?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
God.
Super futuristic mechs, cyborg ninjas, and Solid Snake is crawling around with the Gen 3 iPod. So
That's right. I forget that he has an iPod, like a real iPod.
You can listen to podcasts. Like, there's an in-game podcast that, like, they interviewed I think Ryan Payton and a few other people, developers and stuff. They interviewed each other, and like it's like an in-game commentary track that you can play on your iPod. That you actually use the right analog stick to like use the scroll wheel. It's so good. But yeah, these games are full of neat touches like that. Who can forget that the hour long boss fight at the end of Metal Gear Solid 4? Or I call it the last boss of the game, which is that like 70-minute cutscene.
Yeah, the Rocky Balboa Rocky 4 fight, more or less, because it's not like a good Rocky fight. It's the Rocky 4 fight, where it's just haymakers and Solid Snake ends communism.
I'm not even talking about that. I'm talking about the final boss fight, which is after that. It's that you have to sit there for 70 minutes and watch a cutscene.
You have to watch a movie. Yeah, where you have to watch a movie where a fey white-haired man gets all of his robot parts taken out, and then you have to watch a mustached man attempt suicide and then talk to his dad.
Eating the barrel of a gun.
That's sorry about that, everybody. Spoilers for what happens.
Well, you'll forget about it in like 20 minutes anyway. It's so convoluted anyway.
Yeah. I have to say, I love one of the ways that Phantom Pain gets to have its cake and eat it too in terms of verbosity, because the long-winded conversations are still here, but you can listen to them while you walk around and do other things, which is awesome. Like Snake's Walkman, where you can just be like, oh, great, a long conversation with Revolver Ocelot about the political conditions surrounding the Soviet Union's invasion of Afghanistan. Yeah!
It's awesome. But it's also, like, you know, if you don't want it, that's fine. You can, and the only thing that sucks is that, like, if you listen to them while you're doing a mission, your Walkman does not stop playing the track when you get mission data.
Yeah.
So, like, people are talking over each other. It's kind of... Oh yeah, Ludwig is in the chat talking about the amazing Metal Gear Solid 4 trailer. This came up in our panel on Monday. He showed it off. So Hideo Kojima originally said that he wasn't going to make Metal Gear Solid 4. He didn't want to make it. He thought 3 was the end of the series, which is interesting because it's also like a prequel to 1 and 2 that tells the story of Big Boss that does not conclude the cliffhanger introduced in 2 in any way, shape, or form.
Right.
So, like, that was going to be the end of the Metal Gear trilogy right there, which, again, just shows, like, how much Kojima doesn't really care about the overall story and just wants to tell individual stories that kind of relate to each other in a way. So, originally, Metal Gear Solid 4 was going to be handled by a different director, because he didn't want to make it. You know, he's tired, he wants to move on. And so, apparently he got a ton of death threats. At least that's, like, the reason that I heard. But,
whoa, what?
Fan outcry basically was so strong that Kojima decided to take the reins back.
Wow. Out of fear?
Yeah, I don't know if it was fear or it was just like, fine, you know what, the fans really want me to do.
The fans want it, or I'm dead.
Which, again, like, I'll go into how that affected Metal Gear Solid 4's story in a moment. But anyway, the announcement of him taking the reins is this amazing trailer that shows, like, a bunch of soldiers running towards director's chairs with different names on it. And they all sit down, and it shows, like, the director is someone else. I forget the name of the person. But then, like, Snake takes out an AK and mows them all down and sits in the director's chair, and the name says Hideo Kojima. And then Raiden comes out, and then they're both fighting over, like, who the playable character, who gets to sit in the playable character director's chair. It's pretty funny. It's really cool.
Oh, we should get a link to it. Is there a way we could show it?
Yeah, let me see if I can find it. But, yeah, like...
Guys, in just 2 minutes, by the way, we're going to have Raymond Benson, the writer behind the novelizations of Metal Gear Solid 1 and 2 with us, who's going to be elucidating a lot more on how you take the works of a bizarre author like Hideo Kojima, who's not particularly interested in narrative coherence between all of his games, and turns it into something deeply coherent. We assume. We haven't read these novels. We don't know.
Not yet.
They might be, like, you know, freak out weirdo novels, like the thing, like, it's like Thomas Pynchon via Tom Clancy, or vice versa.
Yeah.
God, that sounds amazing. I want that right now. I want a Tom Clancy novel written by
Tom Clancy.
Oh,
Anthony, the Skype window has a menu, like a right-click menu.
Oh God, come on, Skype. Will you work with me for just 1 second, Skype? All of the different moving parts. Oh wow, Duke has mentioned it's Metal Gear sex novels. I would read that.
Of course you would.
I would read that.
Where are you in the game right now? Is this
All
the
right.
beginning?
This is deeply dangerous. What's happening right now? Where I'm just hanging out while I try to find our.
Because I'm actually curious about the game because I want to play it.
It's fun.
Oh, it's so good. Yeah, Sophia, I'm about 7 or 8 hours in here, and right now I'm doing side missions rather than spoil story for everybody. This is the first day that people are going to be able to play this. Here we go. We're trying to get Mr. Raymond Benson in here, and I think we have him on the line. Skype's connecting. Skype's doing a little spinny thing.
Hello.
Mr. Benson, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Hello! Oh, there you are!
Oh, there you are. Hey, there, I can see you.
Perfect! Everybody, welcome Mr. Raymond Benson to the stream. Raymond, this is Anthony that you're hearing talking. We have Sophia and Dave from Games Radar with us as well.
Hello.
If anybody is just tuning in, this is I Got Next, Games Radar's streaming talk show, where we play video games with fascinating individuals whose work we want to know more about. We have on Mr. Raymond Benson. Mr. Benson, what do I call you Ray or do you prefer Raymond? Tell me that first. Raymond.
Yes.
Raymond, thank you so much for being here today. This is serendipitous. Not only that you could join us at all, but that we were expecting to air a little bit later today because I know you were teaching. So thank you so much for being here. This is awesome.
Yep. Some things got canceled, so I was able to make it.
That's what I'm talking about, things being canceled. That is the absolute best. That's what I like to hear. For anybody that missed our little preamble earlier, to tell you a little bit about Mr. Benson's work, he is a novelist behind a newly released on Amazon and collected as a series of ebooks series of novels called The Black Stiletto. He is an accomplished pianist. He is a teacher. He is a writer of many, many tie-in novels with properties. He's one of the few writers, not Ian Fleming, to write official canonized James Bond books. He has made his own video games once upon a time, including some work on the Ultima series and an adaptation of Stephen King's The Mist. But we wanted to talk to Raymond this week because he is responsible for the novelizations of Metal Gear Solid 1 and 2. Raymond, is there anything I missed in that litany? You're a pretty well-traveled man.
Well, that was enough. Plenty that you missed, but that was enough.
So, Raymond, let's start at the absolute beginning, man. Like, you are all over the place. You are a creator across mediums. How the hell did you get into your career? This is kind of a thorny path you've taken over the past 30 years.
Well, thanks. I it's been a long and winding road, basically. I started off in theater. I was in theater in high school, and then I went to college to be a stage director. I studied theater and got my degree in theater. And after spending a year in Houston at a repertory theater, I went to New York and spent a decade directing plays and musicals off Broadway, off Broadway, off, way off Broadway, and the joke I like to tell is that there's no money in theater, so I became a writer.
which is where you go when you want the big bucks.
Yeah, right.
Let me tell you, especially these days, everybody, when the written word is at its highest value in history. And publishing
especially on the internet.
Especially on the internet. If you want a sure thing, if you guys want to be a millionaire, and by millionaire I mean you can get millions and millions of Monopoly monies. Then
well, I'd like to know how you do that. But anyway,
yeah,
I wrote my first book in the early '80s. It was a nonfiction book that was very well received. That was the James Bond Bedside Companion. And this was the first really big sort of coffee table book about the history of Bond. And covered all the books and all the movies and Ian Fleming's life and all that. Came out in 1984, and that kind of took my career in a different direction. I've always kept my toe in theater a little bit every now and then, but from then on, I really kind of focused on being a writer. However, in 1985, a year after that was published, that's when computer games were just, really hitting the homes, because it started getting in, the Apple IICs and things like that. And computer games at that time were in their infancy, and I got in on the ground floor. I was actually asked to write plot lines for text adventure games. The old kind of like, I don't know if you guys are old enough or even remember the Infocom text adventures like Zork.
Hell yeah,
Zork.
man.
Yeah.
Well, I loved those things. I mean, I played those, and I got hired by a company that was sort of a competitor doing the same type of thing. And that's how I did the Stephen King adaptation of The Mist. I did that and a couple of James Bond titles as text adventures. I wrote those. That was in 85, 86. And I also worked on the pencil and paper role-playing game of the James Bond role-playing game.
Oh, wow.
So I was heavily into games. I always have been, and I liked, as far as computer games and video games, I like the story-based ones. I like the role-playing type, where you play a little guy that's walking around and solving puzzles and fighting guys and talking to people, and there's conversations and things like that, where it tells us a really good story as you're playing the game. That was my main interest. And in the early 90s, very early in the 90s, I did get hired by Origin to be a game designer, writer, and I worked on Ultima, and then, more. That was a big success, and then I got more offers from other companies, and so I worked for Microprose next. Did a game called Return of the Phantom. Then was hired by Viacom New Media, and I did some games for them. And I was pretty much still working as a game designer, writer up until about 96, 97. And at that point, I had been asked by the Ian Fleming estate to write James Bond novels.
Man, that's so exciting. That is such... I can't imagine, going from this career where you didn't even think you were going to be a writer to being invited to, put your own stamp on one of the most storied, ongoing, fiction properties that exists.
I know, it was pretty unorthodox, my entry into publishing novels. So anyway, I left the day job in 97, my computer gaming job. I left that just as my first Bond novel was published.
Man.
And I haven't looked back. I've been a freelance, full-time, stay-at-home, self-employed writer since.
Living the freaking dream, Raymond. That is... and not only do you get to be a writer, but you get to do things that you are actually interested in and are actually passionate about. That's a real rarity in any field.
Most of the time, that's true.
So before I literally have a million questions for you, and I do want to talk about Metal Gear because this is Metal Gear Week. We're playing Metal Gear right now. But before anything else, I personally fell in love with video games because I love game stories. Much like you were drawn to games because you like a story, you like a role-playing game in specific. And that is what I come to games for. But there are a lot of people, in fact, some would argue the majority of people, who just really don't care about story in their games. They skip things, they don't finish stories, they plow through dialogue just wanting to get back to the action. Why is it, that you consider video games such a potent storytelling medium?
Well, it was all, once it became very cinematic, once graphics and the visuals got to be so good that, they were equivalent to watching a good TV show or a movie, that's when, the opportunities really increased twofold for game makers to make interactive, immersive stories that a player could be a part of, not just a passive observer. And the types of people you're talking about, the gamers you're talking about, the Twitch gamers, the guys that just like to shoot things, that just didn't interest me. I really wanted to create stuff that involve you emotionally. And sure, shooting things can involve you emotionally. You get that kind of rush when you're shooting stuff and killing monsters and things. And for me, I'm old school. I like a good story. I like good characters. What can I say? That's what I like.
Well, Dave Roberts, who's here with us, was just explaining to everybody before you hopped on the call the sort of thorny ins and outs of the story of Metal Gear. And even though the fact that, we've sort of gotten the impression that the creator of the Metal Gear series, Hideo Kojima, is not really interested in telling a long-form, coherent narrative across entries, just unique stories and then trying to tie them together. Like, these games, the Metal Gear series is defined by everything that you're just talking about. Like, a really interesting story, if not always the most comprehensible one, and really, really well-defined characters. You could say that the characters in Metal Gear Solid, going back to the beginning, are very cartoonish, almost silly, but their motivations are always easy to understand. It's very easy to get emotionally attached to them, despite the fact that they're so outsized. And, I love these games because of their story, and I always love the story far more than I do shooting or anything like that. Raymond, let's start with how did you become involved with Metal Gear Solid? Because the first game came out about a year after you started working as a full-time novelist, and yet you did that novelization of the original Metal Gear Solid. How did that happen?
Well, the novel that I wrote, the novelization, didn't come out until 2008.
Oh, really?
Right. Yeah. I think 3 of the Metal Gear Solids had already come out.
Yeah.
And I think Konami just sort of decided on the basis of other game companies had started doing novelizations. Like I did the first 2 Tom Clancy Splinter Cell books.
Right.
Under the name David Michaels, which is, that's because the publisher wanted a name that would be the same no matter who was writing the book. So far I think there's been 4 David Michaels. But anyway, I did those, and I guess, Hideo Kojima decided, let's do novels based on the games. And so what I understand was that I was on a short list of 3 or 4 names of authors that he wanted to do it. I guess he was familiar with my James Bond novels. In fact, I had done one of my novels was in Japan. It was took place in Japan, and I traveled through Japan and had a lot of publicity there. So maybe that's how he knew it. But anyway, I don't know. So I was asked, I guess, to. It was a long time ago, so I'm the brain cells aren't quite what they used to be. But I think I had to just sort of describe in a paragraph or 2 how I would approach the story. Or maybe I had to submit, something that I wrote. I can't remember. But I got the job. And they wanted a very faithful adaptation of the story.
See, now I can't imagine that was an easy thing to deliver.
No.
It was not. Especially the second one, Sons of Liberty. That one was...
Okay, we'll get to Sons of Liberty, Raymond. We will get to Sons of Liberty, because boy, we have questions.
The first one was like, see Dick, see Jane, see,
Right.
Compared to Sons of Liberty, it was very easy. But he did allow me, though, every now and then, to expand on some things and even to add a few scenes of my own. The character Mantis, what was it? Psycho Mantis.
Psycho Mantis, yeah.
Yeah, there's a scene in the first novel that's not in the game where it's a very hallucinatory thing that I just had a lot of fun with, and I basically asked, "Can I do this?" And they read it and they said, "Yeah, we like this." So I got to add my own 2 cents worth. But they sent me all the scripts, and they sent me a video of the entire game being played from start to finish with no mistakes. So, I actually tried to play the game. By the mid 2000s, I was not a gamer anymore. I stopped playing games because I was a writer and I didn't have time. But the games had changed so much that the whole reflex action and stuff like that. I died in the first 5 minutes of trying to play almost every time I tried to play.
In fairness to you, Raymond, the early Metal Gear games are not the easiest things to play, even for people that play video games all the time. They are very difficult to control.
Right. So, seeing the video, it was like watching a movie. Of course, it was really a long movie. But that helped a lot. And then, I had the scripts to work from. And then I just, had to turn it into prose. When it came out, it was just like James Bond. There's a lot of people who have in their head what James Bond should be or what Solid Snake should be, mainly because they've played the game or something. So I had people that loved the book and I had people that hated the book. For silly reasons. But I've learned to live with stuff like that.
Well,
you can't please everybody.
It's interesting because you look at something like James Bond. And I would imagine that that's a more difficult character to sort of get your head around. There's a much longer history. There are already all of these different interpretations of that character, right. And but that character is also more well drawn. He's now we consider James Bond archetypal, but it's not just like Solid Snake where it's just like I'm a badass and I smuggle cigarettes into places by eating them, and it's very basic. Did you find it more or less challenging to sort of get your head into the characters for a video game compared to something from a literary tradition?
Well, I'll tell you a little secret. What Kojima told me was think that I'm writing lines and character motivations for Snake Plissken from Escape from New York.
Awesome. Automatically awesome.
That suddenly just made it easy, because not only do I love that movie, but that was such a, on-target characterization by Kurt Russell. You know how he talks, how he moves, how he thinks,
right?
And that made it totally easy. So I think, I don't know if Kojima has ever Hideo Kojima has ever said that in public, but his model for Snake is Snake Plissken.
Oh yeah, man. Go ahead, Dave.
He's got it. His major influences for the characters, there's a character in Metal Gear Solid 2 that's Iroquois Plissken. Snake Plissken is definitely a huge inspiration. And now that I think about it, one of his favorite movie series that is one of the biggest inspirations for the series was James Bond. So I'm starting to piece together the puzzles here that maybe he was a huge fan of your books and that's why he sought you out, because especially Metal Gear Solid 3 is just a straight up James Bond video game,
right?
For sure. But yeah,
I didn't write that one though. I just wrote the first two.
Right.
Has there been a book on the third one?
There has not been, which is
actually
funny.
I think there has, only in Japan.
Only
I think it's
in
just
Japan.
Japanese.
God, I want to read that now. I want to read how they have you fighting against a bug-eyed octogenarian sniper in the woods for 2 hours straight. Raymond, I'm fascinated with, you said that they provided you with a script, they provided you with sort of a mission for this thing, but at the exact same time, I'm fascinated with the idea of how do you look at a little, period of time of gameplay, say in that video that they sent you, and say, how do I make this narratively interesting? Because for a player sitting there and being like, oh, I'm gonna smoke cigarettes, and that will allow me to see infrared beams in a security room that I need to get past, and that feels like a moment filled with incident if you're playing it. But in my head, if I was going to adapt that to prose, you get maybe 150, 200 words out of it tops before you have to move on. And
it's a problem when it comes to stealth games. It was the same problem with Splinter Cell. A lot of the game is sneaking around, being quiet, and not attracting attention to yourself. You don't want to get into firefights or fights or anything like that. You want to be hidden. And to read a novel that is totally boring. You know,
Right.
in a novel, you want to get into fights, you want action, you want to get some stuff. So, you know, we had to sort of make a compromise and kind of understand that, okay, you know, you're trying to be stealthy for a couple of pages, but then, yeah, you got to get into a fight, you got to get into some action. So, you know, that's kind of how that worked.
There's a question from the chat, Anthony, if you
Ooh.
want to. Yes,
Sure.
Duke is asking, did they give a proper timeline to work off of? Because that's where he gets lost.
I'm not sure. I know what that means. A
I think-
timeline.
Yeah, like a story Bible, if you will. Like something like this happens to this character at this time, and this is their past.
Or,
as
yeah,
opposed to,
like a history, because like Metal Gear Solid has one of the most convoluted like stories, spanning like nearly a century of time. Like, did they give you like a, you know, this happened in such and such decade, so you could work with context, or was it just like they kind of just gave you Metal Gear Solid and you made a self-contained novel out of that?
I just really worked with the particular game that I was working on. I knew that there was a lot of backstory, but they didn't even want me to touch it, because unless it was touched in the game itself, then, you know, it was irrelevant. I'm sure, you know, it's hard for me to remember exactly since it was so long ago, but yeah, they didn't. I'm not even sure a lot of that back history existed in that time, like 2008. Did some of it come like later? I don't know.
well, definitely some of it came later, because around 2008, when the novel came out, was right when Metal Gear Solid 4, what was presumed to be the end of the series, had just come out. But then they expanded it later with Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker, and there have been a bunch of different things since then, including the one where you play as a cyborg ninja and cut up watermelons. That's a real thing. Speaking of that cyborg ninja, let's talk about Metal Gear Solid 2. So the first one is relative. Like Konami is happy, Kojima is happy with your work. Do you automatically start working on 2? Was 2 part of the package deal with doing?
No,
one?
it wasn't. It was, I don't think it was. I think it was just a one book at a time thing. I think they liked the first one, so they hired me to write the second one. And it was the same process. You know, they gave me the scripts and the videos and things like that. But I remember going through that one and going, "Wow, this is a really complicated plot in the story."
Did your jaw drop when you saw that script compared to the first script?
Right. Yeah. It was pretty daunting. But, you know, in retrospect, when I look at those 2 books, the second one is a much better book. It is, you know, once I got my, my brain around it, I think I was able to really let it fly. And, you know, I'd had sort of the practice run with the first book. The second book was, I don't know, if you read them, I think the second one's a lot better. And it also got a lot better response from the fans, too. Mm-hmm. You know.
Now, when you say it got a better response from the fans, what do you mean?
Well, there were less comments on message boards and things like that of guys wanting to kill me.
That's always a plus.
Raymond, actually, like, before we get further into Metal Gear Solid 2, I mean, is this, like, did you notice that when you started working on adaptations of video games, actually, let's go back further than that. Did you notice a shift in the attitudes of video game fans between the time that you were making your games and when you started working on sort of modern novelizations of more contemporary games? Was there a change in there? How would you define that change?
Well, you know, when I started, there were no video games. It was all computers. It was all computer games. Video games didn't really start until the very early 90s, with Nintendo and Sega and all that. So computer games were more elite, I think. you know,
Interesting.
in the late 80s and very early 90s. This was before Windows even. Almost all my games were before Windows. I think once the video game thing happened, then younger and, you know, it went more toward a more common denominator as an audience. So, you know, that included, you know, more of everybody rather than just the people who were older, who had computers in their homes, which, you know, at that time they were expensive, you know. And, you know, I think with the advent of the internet and social media and message boards and all this stuff, I think, you know, just like movies and anything else, it's attracted, you know, a wide range of audience, you know, from smart people all the way down to stupid people.
That is the most politic way you could possibly put it. I think that's the like it's a curiosity to me, because I sit there and I think, like, I wasn't on, you know, bulletin boards, and, you know, I was not hanging out in IRC chat back in 1992 because I was 10 and I only had a Nintendo. I did not have a computer, like you said. But like, when I talk to people who were hanging out in bulletin boards, I just have trouble imagining somebody being like, "Oh man, did you freaking see that text adventure of Stephen King's The Mist? I'm gonna kill that guy! That's the worst adaptation of a Stephen King story to text adventure I've ever seen!" That's like a baffling behavior to me. But I can imagine that the moment that you started working on Splinter Cell and Metal Gear, that was just part and parcel of the experience.
Yeah, and it all really started while I was doing James Bond in the late 90s. That was when, you know, people could be anonymous and criticize people online. You know? And that, you know, that brought, you know, the internet's great. It's a wonderful tool. It's opened up the world. It's connected the world. But it's also, you know, it's also got a dark side. It's brought out the worst in people as well. You know,
Yeah.
so. Just look how much cybercrime is being committed and stuff. And I think it's just only going to get worse.
It's funny because Dave was just talking about the fact that Metal Gear Solid 2, the plot of that story is very much about predicting that type of internet culture. It very much sort of saying, like, this is what's on the horizon. It was very prescient for anything, movie or video game or novel or any medium. For 2001 when it was originally conceived. And so tell me about your process for writing that book. How did you go in there and say, like, a lot of that script is long monologues about the sort of philosophical conditions of living in a world where the internet is ubiquitous. Like, very much what we're talking about, where you know, the extremely powerful and the idiots and everybody else sort of exists side by side in the exact same place. So how did you go about saying, well, I can't just have a 60-page monologue about how information will now live forever? How do you turn that into a story?
You know, I really don't remember. I know that for both books, I did a prose outline, kind of like a treatment. Not really not an ABC outline, but a block paragraph outline where every block paragraph represents a chapter. I would sort of you know, separate, you know, chop up the story of the book into these block paragraphs of what's going to go in each chapter, and that was. I do that with all my novels, even my fiction novels, everything. I always make an outline first, and that's kind of where the bulk of the writing really happens. It's where I work out all the plot details and, you know, the red herrings. I'm talking about my own original stuff now.
Right.
Because it saves time when you start actually writing the book. If you have, like, a map, you know, that's what it is. It's like a guide map. That you can follow when you're writing, that helps you. You know, you spend all your writer's block moments with the outline, and not when you're trying to write a book. It's easier to throw out a paragraph from an outline that you don't like than it is throwing out 30 pages of a chapter that you've already written that you don't like. So I'm a big believer in outlines. So I know I did that with both of the Metal Gear Solid books too. And I must have, worked out how to do all that stuff at the time. They look at the outline first. Once I've done the outline, Kojima and his people would see them and say, yeah, this is good, or, maybe change a little this or that or something like that. And I would get some notes, and then I'd start to write.
Man, I have to say that I'm not quite so surprised that adapting something like Metal Gear Solid 2 would bring on a fugue state after you've worked on it. You're like, how did I just do what I did at all? How did that even work? I kid. But I'm interested in the idea of needing an outline to work. I'm a big fan of outlines myself. I need to sit there if I'm putting something together ahead of time, especially a piece of fiction, knowing all of these, even if it changes along the ways, and even if characters fundamentally change along the way, understanding these beats needing to be hit is so important. And I'm curious, what, you mentioned earlier that you had some freedom with working on the Metal Gear Solid series to expand on certain things. And what restrictions were placed on you? In addition to like that freedom to actually come up with new stuff, what did Konami and Kojima say? You absolutely have to have these story beats. Like, this needs to be in your outline. Go back and make sure this is in there, or this is in there, or this can't be in there. Does anything spring to mind?
Nothing springs to mind. I just know, I couldn't deviate really from the plot. I couldn't, I couldn't have Snake suddenly be a musician and be a piano player,
That would be amazing, though.
I'd read that book.
If I could get a prelude where Solid Snake is working at a cabaret in New Orleans on his day off, and he's just like, yeah, it's just me playing for tips from here on out. I would read that book, man. That would be awesome. Oh crap.
Yeah, I don't think I don't think they really said, gave me a list of anything and says you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do this. I don't think they did that. I think if they saw something in the outline that they didn't really want me to do, they would say something. But I can't think of a particular example.
How did the experience working with Konami compare to working with Ubisoft and Tom Clancy on the Splinter Cell series? Were they dramatically different? I mean, I know just from our industry, and I know Sophia and David can attest to this as well, working with a Japanese company on a story is very, very different than working with a European or American company. And
right.
Yeah.
Most of any difficulties that occurred was more on the business side with Konami and Random House, the publisher. But,
really?
Working out, contracts and things like that. That seemed to take a long time. But as far as the creative part was fine. Working with, I worked with a guy named Ryan Payton, who was an American working for Konami at the time when I was writing the books, and he was my main liaison because obviously he could speak English,
right,
and he could speak Japanese. So he was like the guy I would talk to, and then he would go to Kojima and then bring back whatever notes or anything like that. Now the Splinter Cell books, those were original stories. They were not based on the games. Those were, I got to take the character of Sam Fisher and create completely new stories. So that was almost like writing an original, novel of my own. I just had a character that and an organization that I had to use that was already set. But otherwise, those were, that was all original.
That was all stuff that you would come up with on your own.
Yeah.
Speaking of Splinter Cell, to interrupt your next question, I just want to say Limited Fury wants to give a shout out here. He said he was rummaging through his closet and found Splinter Cell books that he bought in high school, and he highly enjoyed them. gave him a great picture of Sam Fisher outside of the game, so he wants to say thank you for writing.
Oh, okay. Well, I only did the first two. That was the one just called Tom Clancy's Splinter Cell, and then the next one was called Operation Barracuda.
So.
So I hope those are the ones that he pulled out of the park.
Raymond, what was Operation Barracuda? I just like to imagine that it's Sam Fisher being stuck in a large aquarium and being like, "This sucks. These giant fish are jerks." That's
Well,
probably
gosh,
not
that was even longer ago than Metal Gear Solid. It was either the operation that he had to do, or it was the operation of the bad guys. I really can't remember now. I've written so many books. Sometimes I can't even remember my own plots. So,
just rub it in, Raymond. Just rub it in. And I sit there, and we all stare down that blank page, and we're like, "How am I gonna eke out 2,000 words? How?" Actually, you came to writing through a very roundabout way. Actually, just a quick moment. Ladies and gentlemen, if you are just joining us, hello, good afternoon to you, good Tuesday to you. This is I Got Next, Games Radar's weekly talk show where we play video games with people who are outside of the world of video games. Today, we're actually breaking our own rules. We're talking to a full-time writer and novelist who actually has worked in the past in the video game industry and has done quite a bit of work adapting video games into novel form. We're talking to Raymond Benson right now. We also have executive global editor-in-chief Sophia Tong hanging out with us. Hello,
Hi.
Sophia.
Hello.
And we have writer and contributing editor David Roberts on the line as well, our resident Metal Gear obsessive. Hello, David.
Hello. Yeah, obsessive's the right word.
Obsessive is the right word. And
where's everybody located?
Oh, all over the place.
All over.
Yeah, I'm in New York. Sophia's in San Francisco, and David's. Where are you, man?
Seattle.
I'm just north of Seattle. Yeah.
Just north of Seattle, and you are in Illinois or Iowa?
Chicagoland.
Chicago. Oh
Chicago.
man, love
We're
that
all
town.
over.
Love that town. That is the best. This is just a variety of time zones. Yeah, everybody. So Raymond, I was just about to ask you, what if you were going to advise a young writer who is interested in getting into video games? I know that it's been a while since you were working in the video game world, but if you were going to advise somebody who wanted to write video games or get into writing novels, what advice would you give them beyond the age-old wonderful piece of very true and accurate advice of just write? Writing is essential, so do that first, but if you had to tell somebody to do something second, what would it be?
Oh boy, I would say really examine your plan B and see if that's something you could live with.
Right.
I'm not being facetious.
No, that's
because my son's a musician. I mean, anybody that's in the arts, it's a tough life. It is really hard. When I was in the gaming business, I moved my family cross country 3 times in 4 years.
Wow.
Yeah, that's because I was with one company and then got a job with another one, and then they laid off a whole division, so I had to find another job, and then I got a job in another place, and then that company went out of business. It's a very volatile business. Mm. So I guess it helps if you're young. If you're married and got kids, good luck. That sounds very negative, but I think it's a reality.
No, I think it's very practical. Like, I don't. When I ask that question, a lot of people respond in a very pie-in-the-sky way. They're like, "Oh, well, find your passion," and you know what? Finding your passion involves realism and thinking about things that you need to think about. Much like, think about what you need to do to actually be a writer and to work in games.
Well, what you said about passion is absolutely right. I mean, if that's really your passion, if it's like, I can't live unless I do this, then that's what you should do. But if you're just sort of, gee, I think I'd like to write video games, that might be fun, You know,
Right.
if that's your attitude, then don't do it. It's got to be, you know, you can't do anything else. So that's what you got to do. Then, you know, you've got to have a drive. You will have the drive to do it. That's in really anything, whether it's writing, you know, theater, movies, film, music, video games. It's all, you know, the entertainment business, showbiz. If that's what, you know, your passion is, and you don't think you can do anything else, then yeah, go for it. But just know it's going to be a hard life. You know, I'm not rich. I'm not Stephen King or Lee Child or any of these people. You know, God bless them. They're in the 1% of authors who, you know, make millions. The rest of us, you know, we can eke by. And it's okay, you know. I mean, I do other things. I teach at a college. I teach film history. You know, I do lectures. I play the piano. I have gigs, you know, where I play the piano. There's all kinds of things I do, and I love doing it. So, you know, I just try to do whatever I can to bring home the bacon.
Yeah, being a sort of jack of all trades seems to be an essential aspect of living a creative life. It seems to me, like, you know, finding all of these different ways to make that passion work for you is a very, very big challenge. It's a very, very big challenge.
Yep.
A little, you know what, man, that got heavy. That got heavy, everybody. I hope you're still with us, hanging out as we play Metal Gear. I like that it got heavy, though. That's why we do this show, man. That like, I like that reality check. I like counterpointing. I don't know if you could see what I was doing on the screen, Raymond, if you're looking at the website where we're broadcasting this, but as you were telling that story, I was playing as Snake and literally chasing around a deranged soldier that when he touched me, it would start, like, causing me to hallucinate. I liked having that as the counterpoint to... It's like a perfect visual representation of what it's actually like to live in a creative field. Because you feel like you're constantly trying to chase down an insane person and make them do what you want them to. The insane person being yourself, of course.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. Yeah.
So hell, man, let's go with a softball. You've devoted, years and years and years of your life to spy fiction. So why spy fiction? Why tales about lone individuals doing clandestine things?
To tell you the truth, I really haven't done that. I mean, I wrote James Bond,
Mm-hmm.
and then whatever, you know, some of the video games like Metal Gear and Splinter Cell are spies, but all my original fiction, there's no spies.
Oh.
My latest series, The Black Stiletto, this is a female vigilante. In fact, 10 of my novels all have female protagonists.
Nice.
So, you know, I like writing for women characters, and I'm pretty good at it, too. I'm channeling my inner Ingmar Bergman. I'm glad you guys got that. I was wondering if that would be too obscure.
Hey, no, Raymond, you have to understand, man. On this show, when I pitched this show to Sophia, my talking point was it's going to be like a radio show. And so that's, like, you know, the frame of reference for topicalness that I'm working under. So Ingmar Bergman that's appropriate, man. That's fitting right in with us here.
Well, Ingmar Bergman's pretty great, I gotta say.
Yeah.
But my favorite film director is Stanley Kubrick. So.
Nice. Okay. Well, tell me what appeals to you about writing a woman character. Like, I find, personally, you know, I've always found it, when I write fiction, it's very, very difficult for me to convincingly write a woman. Because, frankly, I'm not. I was born a white dude. There are certain cultural experiences that I just can't get.
Use your imagination, Anthony.
I try, Sophia! I try, I put on a pair of 13-inch red pumps, and I look at myself in the mirror, and I try to think about what it would be like to be a lady. That's probably more information than everybody needed.
It is.
That's probably. I'm pretty sure everybody didn't need to know that. But yeah, like how do you approach that? You know, like that's a very unique cultural experience. That's outside of your own. So how do you make sure?
Well,
that
you asked, why I did it first, and that was that women buy the most books more than men.
Oh.
There are more women who read fiction and buy books than men do. And most women like female characters. That's not, a hard and fast rule, but I think, a rule of thumb is that's true. So, I wanted to write more books that women would like. And so, Sophia, I think you should try the Black Stiletto books. I think you would like them.
I'm curious. Now I want to look into that.
And I can say right now that it's being developed for television right now.
Oh, hey! Awesome.
Nice.
I
can't really say any more about it, but there should be something, hopefully.
Can you tell us where you are in that process at least? Are you looking at a pilot? Are you looking at anything like that?
I can't. I'm not allowed to say until a certain time.
Raymond. You gotta take the modern. You gotta do the stock PR answer. I can neither confirm nor deny. We don't have details to share today. That's right.
I don't have details to share. So
that's the gold standard. That's the gold standard one. Actually, well, tell us a little bit about the Black Stiletto. I know when we were talking, you were telling me that is the big thing that you have up on Amazon right now. You can buy all 5 books together of the Black Stiletto, and you said that it's about a vigilante. But what specific?
I'll give you the elevator pitch.
Yeah, perfect.
It is about a woman in the 1950s who goes to New York, and she doesn't like the way she sees a lot of social injustice and stuff like that. So she puts on a mask and calls herself the Black Stiletto, and she goes out on the street and fights for social justice and fights crime, kind of like a female Batman a little bit. And she's active for 5 years and mysteriously disappears. She becomes famous in the meantime. Nobody knows who she is. And then we cut to the present, and there's a grown man here in the Chicago suburbs taking care of his mother who has Alzheimer's in a nursing home. And he discovers she was the Black Stiletto.
Badass.
So it's 2 parallel stories, one in the past, which is all her adventures, and one in the present, which is told from his point of view about, finding out all about this stuff, taking care of his mother. It's kind of a family story, as well as, threats from the past appearing and things like that. So, it goes back and forth all the way through the 5 books. And it is a 5-book series that ends with the 5th book, so it's all complete. It's really a serial, I guess you could say.
That's very fitting, considering how pulpy that setup is, man. That is awesomely pulpy. I love it. I love that. This is something, you mentioned, okay, women read more books, and that's a good...
Do they?
Yeah, I would love... I'm sure that your publishers have all sorts of data to point to that would illustrate that for us. But I'm curious, you worked on the James Bond series, and man, Fleming's James Bond books, especially the earliest ones, they're not
politically correct.
They're not the most feminist texts.
No.
Casino Royale literally has a whole chapter where Bond just sits there and bellyaches about the fact that he has to work with a woman. It goes on for like 20 pages.
This is why I like Mission Impossible.
1953. That was published in 1953.
Yeah.
You got to keep that in mind.
Of course.
And also, you got to look at who Fleming was. He was of the upper crust, white imperialist, British imperialist.
Yes.
Nature. So that was just second nature to him. That was just the way he was, the way his peers were. That was the way the times were. You know, so that's what's reflected in that. Yeah.
Well, what interests me is how, given what you want to do as an author in your own work, and I look at things like Metal Gear and James Bond, where the gender politics can be very, like you said, less than politically correct. How do you sort of get yourself into the mindset where you want to be faithful to the established narrative, but for a guy that writes about, you know, a badass woman working as a vigilante fighting for social justice in the 1950s, that's a very, very different perspective. How do you sort of approach writing material that doesn't necessarily jive with your own politics, man?
Well, I would certainly say that the Black Stiletto's politics jive with mine.
Right.
I mean, she's very much a feminist before that word was even in our vernacular, and I consider myself a feminist. And she, I don't know, she. I'll put it this way: the Library Journal, when the first book came out, their review was very, very favorable. But they I always had a hard time describing what the Black Stiletto was. You know, how do you describe it to somebody? And they said they nailed it in one sentence. They said, "This is a mashup of the work of Gloria Steinem, Mario Puzo, and Ian Fleming under the editorship of Stan Lee."
That's a hell of a description, man!
That's quite a combo.
And I said, "That's perfect. That is it. That's what it is."
Wow.
So, you know, I basically, you know, I'm a historian too. I mean, I love history. I used to live in New York, which is where it took place, and I love New York history, and you know, a lot of that stuff I knew. And as far as creating her character, you know, I based it on people I know, on myself, on, you know, the Alzheimer's came from my mother-in-law. She did die of Alzheimer's, so my wife and I lived through that part. So that whole stuff that takes place in the present, you know, a lot of that's based on real life that I experienced. You know, a writer, it's hard to pinpoint where you get all the stuff that you're writing about. You know, it just kind of happens. You train your mind to soak up stuff and then regurgitate it. You know, the worst thing you can ask a writer is, where do you get your ideas? You know, we don't know.
That's the worst. It's the worst question. That is the worst question of all time.
Yeah. Well, it's, you know, almost as bad as how do you come up with a character, or how do you write for a female? You know, well, you know, how do you write for somebody of another race, or you know, you're a writer, so you just do it.
Mm. Raymond, we only have a few minutes left. I want to make sure we hit a couple more questions. Hey, where do you get your ideas? No, wait a second. Damn it! I can't believe.
I'm actually curious about you know, the feedback that you've gotten from female fans who read your books. Like, is there a particular type of character that they tend to enjoy? Because, like, for me, I guess I don't necessarily identify if they're male or female, but I do like seeing strong female roles, or, like, you know, ones that are clever, smart, not necessarily using their feminine ways to get what they want. But do you notice that you get any kind of feedback around that?
Yeah, I mean, if you look just look on the Amazon reviews for the 5 Black Stiletto books, and there's a lot of women that are reviewing them, and, you know, I would say 98% of them are all very positive. So, yeah, and you know, my wife is a good judge too. I mean, she's an avid reader. She's a book club reader type. You know, she reads literary stuff as well. But she really got behind the Black Stiletto. She liked it a lot, and she was she's always my beta reader. For anything I write, she reads it first, and she gives me good notes, and she was also my female character person, as far as, you know, what, okay, a woman would never say that, or, you know, a woman wouldn't wear that, and, you know, and that kind of thing. Yeah, so she was good to have as a sounding board when it comes to that.
That's cool.
We do have one question here from Duke. I know you said earlier, Raymond, that you are not much of a gamer anymore. You know, writing it takes up a lot of time. But Duke says here, is there a game series that you would want to do an adaptation of? Is there anything out there that you'd like to do a novel of from games at this point?
That's a good question. I can't think of anything right now. No. There's lots of like TV series and movies that I'd like to adapt and stuff like that. Usually the game things come to me. They approach me first. Like the last one I did. Well, I did Hitman. I did one for Hitman about 3 years ago, and just last year I did one for Dying Light. Have you heard of Dying Light?
Oh, the zombie game.
Yeah, zombie game. Yeah, it was only published in Poland because that's where the game company is. Yeah, so it hasn't been published here, not yet anyway. They had trouble getting a publisher for it, but maybe it'll eventually be published here. But that was the last one I did. I thought that was a lot of fun doing that was my first and only zombie book that I ever wrote, and I thought that was fun.
Man, that's a tough one. I can't imagine like sitting down and being like, how am I going to make zombies interesting? That's
another, that was an original story too. It was supposed to be a prequel to the game. And I used a female protagonist for that as well. A woman who's like out on her own on the streets just after the outbreak, and she's like trying to survive by herself. So that's what that was about.
Everybody, we have literally just 5 minutes left on today's show. I do want to tell you a little bit about what we have coming up. Tomorrow, right here on twitch.tv/gamesradar, we have another stream for you. It's going to be awesome. Ludwig Kitzman and Ashley Reed are going to be playing Runbow, a new independent game for Wii U. And it is an awesome, bizarre little platformer. It is delightful. I've been playing it myself. I love it. Tune into that. That'll be at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 3:30 p.m. Pacific. And then be back here on Thursday for our show How It's Done, which is our other talk show, wherein we actually just talk to video game developers, and we talk about the things that they've made. And it's a very similar conversation to this one, except I don't tell people about when I dress up in women's shoes. I lied. I do that on that show as well. That always happens. Dave Roberts, is there anything super awesome that you have up on GamesRadar.com right now that you would like to tell people to read?
Well, I last week was kind of like prepping for PAX, and this whole weekend has just been PAX extravaganza. So, but I do have a fine article. I wrote 1,000 words on the iconic corrugated cardboard box found in the Metal Gear Solid franchise.
Yes.
Kind of my love letter to the weird and bizarre world of how Metal Gear Solid straddles that line between the goofy and the serious, and the cardboard box is like the converging point of that for me. So that's up on the site. That was a ton of fun to write.
Dave, could you pop that link into the chat so that people can get to that action? Sophia, is there anything that you're particularly excited about on the site that you would like to point people to?
Well, knowing that Metal Gear's out, if you guys are feeling kind of lost, Dave did write a really great kind of synopsis with a glossary at the bottom in case you need to know who everyone is. You should definitely check it out on our site.
And everybody, I encourage you to do all of the shopping on Amazon.com. You can go, if you have a Kindle, you can go get the Black Stiletto, books 1 through 5. Be the cool person who knows what this new television show is that people are talking about and are binging on Netflix when it finally comes out. You could be the cool person who's like, yeah, man, I already read Raymond Benson's Black Stiletto books before it was a TV show. You dummies. I read. I'm literate. Don't say dummies. People take that badly. You can also buy his Metal Gear Solid books on Amazon as well, and everything that the man has published over the years. You can also go to RaymondBenson.com. Raymond, you were telling me that you're about to have a new website. Is that the case?
Yeah, it's being redesigned, basically. It's going to launch in a few days. So if you go right now to RaymondBenson.com, also the Black Stiletto has her own website. It's theblackstiletto.net. So if you go there, you can see some videos, and you can download a free short story. hear some music and stuff like that. But both of those websites are gonna get a facelift basically in the next few days.
Nice. And you can also follow Raymond on Twitter, and that handle is let me remember here. It's twitter.com at Raymond Benson. It's that simple. It's that freaking simple. Raymond, thank you so much for being here, man. This was awesome. This is everything that I always want this show to be. You're a cool guy, man. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for joining.
Okay.
And everybody, follow us. Click the follow thing. The heart. Touch us on the heart below the video player. That's what I recommend you do. We will be back tomorrow, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
And we're out.
Yay.
Off the air.
We're still on the air.
Oh,
Very
just
quiet.
kidding.
We're just the quietest. Off the air, but we're the quietest. We're just showing people the schedule so that they can see it. And I hope
Schedule.
somebody's
Memorize it.
speakers are really loud, so it's just really creepy that I'm whispering.